What's everybody, Manny from Motomillion. Welcome back to the R1M series. As you saw in the last video, we got our tires mounted onto our OZ Racing wheels. Now we're going to be installing the wheels onto this beautiful bike. While we're doing the wheels, we're going to be doing the full Brembo braking upgrade, just because we're going to be having to remove the calipers off the bike in the front. So we thought we might as well get to the brakes. It's a lot of work. It might not fit into one video. Just to keep you guys interested, that we don't put up a 2-hour-long video, we might split it up into 2 videos. But in the front, we're going to be using the GP4 RX calipers, the T-Drive rotors, and in the back, we're going to be using our underslung rear caliper setup with the P234 billet rear caliper. And while we're doing the rear wheel, we're going to use our ultra lightweight rear rotor along with the 520 conversion kit. It's going to be a lot of work, so without further ado, let's get to it. In preparation of getting the front wheel off, we had to dismantle our bike lift because it wouldn't fit. It's not one of those long lifts, and we had to use a front stand. And I got to get under here to the brake lines where the T's are. So I have to lift the front wheel off. Regardless, the wheel's got to come off, and I want to remove the fenders and everything. But this is where the fun starts, guys. And also to install that front stand, I had to remove the ABS sensor because there's that plastic piece over here. We're going to undo the axle pinch bolts so that we can get the axle out. Since we're going to do some work under there with brake fluid, I'm going to try to take off as many parts as I can that might get damaged with brake fluid. It's a lot easier than the Ducati ones. Then, just for good measure, what I usually do is I'll put some of these bolts back where they came off of, so that number one, you don't lose the bolts. Number two, that you remember where they came off of. We undo our pinch bolts. This is the front wheel off. It is quite heavy. Mind you, it has the rotors on it. But in the last video, if you guys are wondering the weight differences, we already measured the wheel, so we know exactly what the weight differences are. And you want to make sure you put your axle somewhere that it's not going to get dirty. And our rear stand has the little location for the axle. We'll just stick it in here. We know that it's not going to roll on the floor, and we're going to do one axle at a time. So the front axle first and the rear axle afterwards. We're going to undo the caliper lines from here. The brake lines for the calipers are up here, and then also this is for the master cylinder. So guys, we have some of our parts here. Let me show you the calipers we're going to be using. We're using the GP4 RX calipers. These are the top of the line street calipers that are available for the R1M. They are 2-piece calipers, but even though they're 2-piece, they're the stiffest road calipers that Brembo makes for these bikes. When I say road calipers, what's the difference between the road calipers and the race calipers? These have proper dust shields in them. Race calipers do not come with dust shields. Most of the time, race calipers, if you ever watch any form of racing, you'll see them, they'll go out for a session, they come back, the mechanics will remove the calipers and wash everything up and put them back on the bike. And that's the difference. They are a huge improvement. And yes, there's GP4 MS calipers in 100mm format, which this distance right here. The R1Ms are 108. The GP4 MS is a step above these, but we're using 108mm because that's what fork legs are calling for. That's why the GP4 RX is the top of the line road calipers that's available for these bikes, and that's what we're going to be using. And as far as the lines go, you do need a set of replacement lines. We do have these lines available, but they are meant only for our Brembo Complete upgrade package. So the package comes with everything. Comes with the brake lines, the rear underslung caliper, and the front calipers. And because the angles are different, as you see, the stock calipers are mounted on the side with an angled banjo. These ones, when they go on the bike, well, this is the other side, but just to show it to you, I'll show it to you this way. When they go on the bike, the banjo goes on here. Technically, that banjo is going to sit on this side flat looking towards your radiator, and that's why you need the new lines. Now I'm just trying to figure out which way to go in terms of losing the least brake fluid. And I'm gonna first assemble some of this stuff. That way we just take off the block for the brake calipers, and the calipers will be ready to go. And we're gonna be upgrading all the bleeders with the Stahlbus bleeders, and I'm running the Protai titanium banjo bolts on this. It matches it fairly nicely, even though the Fren Turbo stuff comes with really nice black aluminum banjos. I'm just going to be using these ones. We're putting one crush washer on the top, one crush washer on the bottom, and then the beautiful thing with these fittings are that they swivel. So we're going to do once we do our final mounting, we'll put these we'll put them exactly at the angle that we want them. It's going to go pretty much like this, and this is still not tight, so we could swivel this in place. And before I go ahead, I'm going to remove these bleeder bolts. We are going to be replacing them with our Stahlbus bleeders. These makes the bleeding process is much easier. And I'm going to give you a heads up, these usually come loose. This is where the bleeder is, and they're 8 mils. These usually come loose from Stahlbus, as you can see. I'm just going to snug them into place so that we don't get any fluid leaking, because I'm just trying to avert creating a mess over here. I wonder if you have enough room to put these calipers on the fork legs so that I have the brake line ready right up there. I think we do. For now, I'm just going to use the stock bolts just to hold them in place. I'm a little picky with the feel of the brakes, at least, but forget about the braking feel and the performance upgrade. These calipers just look like $1,000,000 and I love them. And so now we have this piece right up here that's ready to go on. So this is our block. There is a hard line that comes on top of here, and this is our old block right here, which the hard line is right here. As you can see, it is really tight. So I want to first try to remove these stock ones out of there, and with making as least of a mess as possible, get the other one on there. My hands are going to get messy. Everywhere's going to get messy, so because once you loosen it, it'll start leaking. It is definitely loose because I could feel the brake fluid on my hands. This is the stock calipers. Let me move them out of the way. Told you guys this is going to get messy, and it's already leaking everywhere. Now we're on a time crunch to get this block on there. There we go. The line is in the line, in the brake line T. At least we're not leaking fluid everywhere. Now all we got to do is we just got to tighten that the same way we took it off. Yeah, that's tight. Wow, one down. We got one more to go. I think this time I didn't jinx myself. I usually jinx myself, and even my wife makes fun of me, you know? I tell her I'll be out of the house, I'll be 10 minutes. 4 hours later, I'm still dealing with one bolt. In the beginning of the video, I did not mention to you guys that these are carbon fiber brake lines. And what's cool about these lines is, well, from a brake line, what you want is, you want the least expansion as possible when it comes to brake lines, because that gives you that direct brake feel. Because once you squeeze your brake lever, what ends up happening is that with rubber lines, the rubber lines expand outwards, and that's when you lose that feel. Instead of the pressure going from the piston of the brake master cylinder to the calipers pistons, what ends up happening is the lines swell. And to get in front of this, there's stainless brake lines that everyone has heard, because they're braided with stainless steel, just like the stock lines on this R1M. But again, everything has a property of elasticity, which means that they'll start deforming after a certain pressure. So even the stainless lines that are a step above the rubber lines, they will still start expanding if you apply enough pressure. With these carbon fiber brake lines, they have a minimum burst pressure rate of 16,900 psi. That means that these get tested to 16,900 psi when they're built. That's not a mistake. I'm not making it up. Look it up. It is what it is. It is 16,900 psi. That's a crazy amount of pressure. What that means is that this line can hold that much pressure. Obviously, it might swell up, but you're not running that kind of pressure on a braking system. And again, these lines make a big difference over even the stainless lines in terms of the brake feel because they feel so direct. The other cool part about it is if I run a knot in this line like this, just like as you see, I could still install it on the bike and it'll still work perfectly. You can't do this with a stainless line because that's one downside of stainless lines, are they start binding. You can't turn them around and try to route it as you want. That's what's cool about these lines. So even if you pull it this a little bit, you're not going to have problems with the brake lines working. But as I showed, I'm going to bend the bracket to have the least amount of turn here as possible. But that's what these lines are about. Try to give you guys an explanation in short form, but you guys can look it up. I think our blog section has a write-up about this, if I'm not mistaken, but these are really special lines. Also, they're used in some of the MotoGP teams. Also, the Formula 3 series for automobile racing uses all Fren Turbo's Carbotech lines. These are proprietary to Fren Turbo. People can call it carbon fiber lines. I think it's just the look of their stainless lines that are carbon fiber, but there's no brand that has this line. This is the Carbotech. But let's get back to it. I just lowered the bike right now to get access to the brake reservoir because we are gonna bleed the brakes. Just a quick bleed, just so we could put some fluid in the calipers that we're not gonna have a hard time when we change this master cylinder. And we're gonna switch to the Brembo HTC 64T brake fluid. And I started using the Brembo HTC 64T after my good buddy Justin introduced me to it. He runs one of the most successful GT4 teams in the United States, if not in the world. They actually just won the IMSA GT4 series with a Porsche GT4 RS. This is the least compressible brake fluid that you could get. A lot of people get hung up on boiling temperatures, but what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have the least amount of compression. Again, it's the same thing with the lines expansion, that you want the least amount of compression so that you still have that direct feel. And this is Brembo's top of the line fluid. Now let's get to the caliper. Let's set this up. You're going to see the beauty of these stall bus bleeders. Usually bleeding brakes, if you don't have a power bleeder, it is a two-person job. This is just going to make it a one-person job because there is a check valve in here. It's not going to let any air in once we crack this open like this. I'm also keeping an eye on my fluid level up top. So I think that's good enough for just the initial bleed to fill the lines. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to put together the master cylinder just like we put together the calipers. I'm going to have the line, feed the line through the here so that we could get to the block, and once we remove the block we could quickly put the master cylinder in place. For the master cylinder, we're using the Brembo Corsa Corta 19 RCS master cylinder. Why are we using RCS 19 and not 17 or 16? So guys, this is the main question that we get. You have to match the size of the piston of your master cylinder to the size of the piston of the calipers you run. You're not gonna, you're not gonna do any harm if you run a 17 RCS. You're probably not gonna have the brake feel that you want because the piston might be undersized. Again, some people prefer different braking characteristics over another, but Brembo recommends that you run a 19 on the piston size that comes on these GP4 RX calipers. We are going to be using the brake light switch, but we have to wire it up. I'm not going to do it in this episode. I don't want to deal with any wiring right now. I'm going to first get everything set up and then we'll do the brake light switch afterwards. I'm just going to take this off, and these simply just come right off. You could either pull it off. If you can't pull it off, just get yourself a flathead screwdriver, and if you just twist it around a little bit, this thing just pops right out, as you saw, and it comes out right just like that. We are using the Pro-Ti titanium banjo bolt on this one as well. And if you're running an R1, your stock master cylinder's banjo bolt's not going to fit on a Brembo. Brembos are M10 by 1.0 thread, and most of the master cylinders that you get, not most of them, but the master cylinder thread on this R1s are M10 by 1.25, I believe. We'll go here like this, and we're going to feed it down. It goes down by the shock. It's zip tied on there, so we're going to have to cut that zip tie when we remove the stock master cylinder. This is our horn. We'll put it over here. Now we could put this master cylinder up here. Just feed this brake line. I want to just put this in here. Again, same idea as the calipers. We want to minimize the brake fluid loss. Stop it from somewhat creating a mess until we get this other line in there, and then we're going to put our new block in place. Okay, so that's tight enough, but now I want to get this piece off as soon as possible. So we're going to get to the master cylinder as quickly as we can. There we go. That's the stock master cylinder. Let me get this in place first. So the master cylinder is on there. What I'm doing is I'm going to open this up. This is our bleeder for the master cylinder. We're going to be replacing it with our stall bus bleeder valve. And don't forget, these things come loose from stall bus, so you want to tighten this up. Now I'm going to bring the bike down. We're going to be putting our reservoir over here, Rizoma reservoir. One thing to notice is there's different nipples that comes on these reservoirs. One is bigger and one is smaller. The Brembo reservoirs always use 6mm hose, whereas the OEM ones for Japanese bikes will use an 8mm hose. Since we're using a Brembo master cylinder, we're going to be using this. Next, we're going to grab our tubing. So this is Tygon tubing that we have, and this is the 6mm since we're running a Brembo master cylinder. And the cool thing about Tygon tubing is that it's stable with brake fluid. And we're going to place it here. This way we can see the air bubbles that are inside our reservoir. I want to carefully measure it. You don't want to cut it too long because you don't want to kink the line, and you don't want to cut it too short because you want to make sure that the line is long enough. Before I even get to bleeding the brakes, I think I want to first go ahead and install the wheels, the rotors, everything on there. That way we don't have to separate the pads or anything like that. Perfect, so that's your ABS ring. We're going to be running the black Pro-Ti bolts for the brake rotors and the ABS ring. Also, we're going to run the black ones for the calipers. How good does this blue look though? It's not exactly the same blue as the stock wheels, but I kind of think that the stock wheels were a little too dark. It's got like purplish blue to it. This is going to stand out a lot more, I think, on the bike. And on the previous R1M that we had the Marchesini wheels, which was shinier, was anodized blue and was shiny. This is matte. This is our T-Drive rotors. This is the top of the line rotors that Brembo has. That's in their street catalog. They are race rotors, but they're also acceptable for road use. And what makes them special is that these are fully floating rotors, except that the bobbins are T-bobbins and they're not round. And this gives it better properties in terms of thermal expansion. And this stuff that you see, we get questions about these all the time. This is just, I guess when they tighten these, they put these marks on here. These are thread checker so that you can make sure that they're not going to come loose. That's one rotor on. And if you guys hear, those are the floating rotors. When you push it, when you start pushing a bike front and back, you might think that you got some, you know, bearing issues, but it's not your bearings. It is just your rotors floating. Front axle is in. So when you buy our kit, these spacers are included. You have to run these spacers. I'm going to put one spacer there, one spacer in the bottom. That's the caliper bolt holding our calipers. Now, we're going to be running the Protai caliper bolts in black, and I can't stress you enough. So the bigger bolts come with a paste. This is ceramic anti-seize. Be very liberal with it when you're using it, because aluminum and titanium tends to bind together, and you don't want to have a surprise when you go to remove your caliper bolts next time you want to remove your wheels off the bike or calipers, that it's not coming off and it's seized on there. So now, I think I'm going to go ahead with the brake bleed. There you go. Look at this guy. He likes Kawasaki's and he's like a ninja.
No air?
No, no air whatsoever. Yeah, I think we should just, this is finished.
So how do we find out if it works? We do Sappies?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, the fender is on. Now the brakes are working. So we got everything on. We haven't tightened our calipers, neither have we tightened anything regarding the wheel. What we're going to do is we're going to remove it off of the front stand before we tighten anything on here. And we want to balance the bike on the front wheel. So we first did that. Now there's a sequence of tightening the axle pinch bolts. That's done. So now we got to do the calipers. It's 26 foot-pounds is the torque spec. Perfect, that's it guys. So we want to check that the brakes are working. Actually the brake feel is pretty good. This is by no means our final bleeding. We're gonna still do some bleeding after we let it sit overnight with the zip tie, and we're gonna get to the rear brakes. But overall, I think this looks great. Before I call this done, I haven't forgotten about the brake light switch. We're gonna do that later because I wanna take my time with the wiring, and I have some connectors that I've used before that I know that works, so that we can make it somewhat of a plug and play, that we won't snip these connectors off of it. And on the next episode, you guys are gonna see us tackle the rear brakes and also the rear wheel at the same time with the 520 kit. Today, I don't wanna run out of daylight, so I don't wanna push things, but I wanna first clean up this mess that we made over here. And you know, we'll go on to the next one. And thank you guys for watching as always. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Until next time, guys, have a great one.